Be. Such a simple looking word. 2 letters, 1 sound, a homophone of be, though it's easy to tell the difference between the insect and the verb that describes the most basic action of existing. But this word, one of the most commonly used every day, is one of the strangest when it comes to use with different tenses and pronouns. You are probably familiar with all of these words, but may not have clicked that they are actually all the same word in a different form. Clearly, be is an irregular verb. When it comes to pronouns, the question really is, to be or not to be. Most native English speakers have simply gotten used to how bizarre this word is and use it naturally without a second thought. However, the irregularity of this verb can cause confusion, even to those who have English as a first language.
Be you angels? Musical size block!
In pretty much every language, the most common irregular verbs tend to stay irregular simply because people are accustomed to using them that way, while less commonly used irregular verbs are more easily changed to fit regular patterns. When they are not used as much, it's a lot easier for people to change the way that they use language, but when a word is used a lot, it is very difficult to break old habits. For example, the word learnt has long been the past participle of the word learn, but people are very comfortable switching to learned, so that the word matches the rule of adding ed that regular verbs use. To be is probably the most commonly used verb in English, so it's very resistant to change. But how did this mess come about in the first place? Once again, this is due to the English language being a melting pot of words and grammar rules from other countries over the centuries. The word be itself seems to have very ancient roots, coming from an unknown language that predates both European and Indian languages, known as Proto-Indo-European, or PIE, which has been reconstructed to some extent by language experts. PIE is a hypothetical language that was put together by tracing the etymology of all known languages back to their roots. It was found that pretty much all of the earliest forms of European, Middle Eastern and Indian languages have a lot in common, using very similar sounds to create the same meanings. By taking the sounds in common between all of these ancient languages, PIE was created to represent a possible common ancestor of them all. It, or something like it, would have been spoken from 4500 to 2500 BC around the area that now contains Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria and Kazakhstan. The PIE word bu, meaning to exist or to grow, evolved into the Sanskrit word bhava, which means becoming, and the German words bist and bin, as well as similar words in Russian, Slavic and Lithuanian. The German du bist is very similar to the Middle English thou beest, having both evolved from the same words. During the evolution of Middle English to Modern English, the suffixes est and eth were removed to simplify the forms of many words. For example, the word think had different forms depending on the pronoun it followed, but the suffixes were removed to become more uniform. However, ever problematic, the verb to be did not follow suit. Instead, a different problem was solved, one that went further back into history. In Old English, to be had no past tense, so it became the future tense of the similar meaning word am, which only had a present tense. The word am, which also evolved from PIE, coming from the verb hesmi, which means to exist, but with an implication of a defining behaviour. From this we also get the word essence. This PIE word, hesmi, evolved into the Greek word emi, which is famously used in the Bible for God's name, implying that he is the essence of existence itself. In Latin, hesmi became sum, again retaining the meaning to exist. This marriage of the word am, meaning existence in essence, to be, meaning existence and growth, made sense, even though they both began as separate words. Now with be as the future and am as the present, the word was still in need of a past tense. The word was came from the Pi word juez, which meant to live or to stay or to dwell, to abide or to spend the night. In other languages, the meaning evolved to imply survival. It came into English through the Proto-Germanic word wesania, which meant to remain or to exist. So although it was a distinct word, the nuance of the Old English word wesan meant that it also comfortably fit into the role of the past tense for am and be. The origins of were as plural for was are more unclear, but it seems the best current explanation is that when the Vikings invaded, their similar language with the same Pi roots would have mixed with some of the Old English. As the Vikings likely continued to speak their own language, some of their words were adopted by the Anglo-Saxons. But the marriage between be and was also had some nuance, which brings us to our word been. While was came from the Proto-German to remain, the Old English word bion came from the Proto-German bian for to dwell, which is closely related in meaning to the Pi juez, but comes from the root word biu, from which we also got be. So bion came to be used for permanent truths, while wesan was for past events with definite endings. By the 13th century, be had become the infinitive, participle and imperative form of am and was. They also tried to replace were with wast in the 1500s to match it with beest, etc. And a century later, wast evolved into wert, perhaps to match with art, as in thou art more temperate, before finally it came back to were again. This brings us back to modern English. In the 16th century, the forms beest and beeth were replaced with are. The word are would have evolved from art in Middle English, which may have come from the Old English arun, which may have been adapted to make a distinction from the Proto-German word bionia, which meant future becoming. To become would mean a change in the future, but are means a present state, and both refer to existence. The word is seems to also have come to us from Pi, this time from the word hes. European words that evolved from this Pi word carry the meaning of true, thing, and in reality. So it's quite similar to am for existence in essence, and although it's unclear when this happened, it must have been adopted into the pattern in the same way as was, were, and are had been. So although this verb, to be, as we see it today, looks like a random mess of sounds that have no business being related, it turns out that the historical story of how they all got there actually makes a lot of sense. Thanks for listening. Check back soon for more tips on how to master English with focus on learning.